Whose car is this? She didn't flinch. Mine. That was all it took. A black woman. In a military vehicle. Not in uniform. And to him, that meant trouble. So he cuffed her. Right there. In a space marked senior personnel. While she stood still like a statue of dignity carved from war. But the twist? She was a major general. And the Pentagon was on the line in under 19 seconds. Let me ask you something. Could this happen in your town? Which state are you watching from? And if justice requires a badge, then who protects the ones who wear it? Welcome to Mr. 7 Stories. Like, subscribe, and stay with us. This one will stay with you. The sky over Bridgetown, Georgia that day was as clear as glass. The midday sun bore down on the parking lot of Ashgate Hold, the county's administrative headquarters, so fiercely it looked like it might melt the faded paint lines under each white square. The American flag on the steel pole hissed softly as it stretched taut in the wind, as if even it were holding its breath for something about to unfold. A black SUV with a dusty military license plate slowly rolled into a space marked senior personnel, credentials required. The door opened, and a black woman in her early 40s stepped out. No sunglasses, no purse, no rush in her stride. Just sand-colored khaki pants, a dark polo shirt, and worn military boots, silent, solid. She stood upright, eyes glancing at the parking sign for 3 measured seconds, like someone trained to read an environment before taking a single step. Celeste Harmon hadn't come to draw attention, but somehow her presence made it impossible to look away. Across the street, Officer Colton R. Maddox, white 42, tall and broad-shouldered in his full Navy uniform, badge gleaming on his chest, had just finished his patrol shift. He saw the vehicle. Then he saw Celeste. And that was all it took. No radio call. No legitimate cause. Colton strode across the street, each step thudding against the sun-scorched concrete like a gavel falling harder than the last. No greeting. No question. He stopped just behind her and barked in a gravelly tone that sounded more like an order than a statement. Whose vehicle is this? Celeste turned. Her expression wasn't angry, just still, like the surface of a lake before it's disturbed. It's mine. Colton squinted, not because of the sun, but because something about her presence made him uneasy. A black woman, no uniform, no visible insignia, stepping out of a military vehicle in a reserved space for senior personnel, didn't sit right. That kind of vehicle's usually assigned to high-ranking officers. You got credentials. Celeste quietly reached in her pocket, not rushed, just deliberate. She pulled out a thick military ID with a silver border, QR code, and embossed seal. She didn't hand it over, just raised it to eye level for him to see. Colton glanced at it, didn't touch it, didn't trust it. Borrowed the vehicle, huh? Doesn't match your look, if I'm being honest. Sunlight from a flagpole glinted off the silver cuffs on Colton's belt. Celeste noticed. Her voice was calm, not defiant, just a statement of fact. It's not borrowed, and I don't need to match anything. Her response made Colton step back half a pace, not out of fear, but because her calmness stung. I'm checking the back of the vehicle. You armed? I'm not carrying anything. Then I'll need to verify that. Do you have a warrant to search the vehicle? I'm law enforcement. I have the right to inspect a suspicious vehicle. Suspicious, as in I don't fit your idea of who should be driving it. Colton didn't answer. He motioned for backup. A younger officer pulled up in a patrol car, visibly unsure of what he was walking into. Celeste remained exactly where she was, upright, composed, unafraid. Colton stepped closer, raising the cuffs to eye level. I need to detain you to verify your identity. You saw my ID, Celeste said. I can't verify it's real. Because I'm not in uniform? Or because I don't look like someone you believe belongs here? Colton said nothing. The handcuffs snapped shut with a sharp click, like a verdict that needed no trial. A nearby woman froze in place. A young girl near the flagpole raised her iPad and hit record. Celeste didn't resist. She walked calmly, hands cuffed, head held high, as if she were on her way to deliver a keynote speech, and the man escorting her had no idea what he'd just done. In that searing midday sun, her shadow stretched long, not just across the painted lines, but across the very system that once believed only certain people were worthy of trust. The patrol car door slammed behind Celeste Harmon. The cold sound cut through the still air like an exclamation point. No sirens, no announcements, just a quiet car pulling through the intersection, carrying a woman in cuffs, walking tall, with eyes that didn't beg for defense. Inside, the car felt like a mobile cell. The scent of worn leather, dust caked on the windows, and a low-band radio crackling beneath the shallow, anxious breaths of the young officer riding shotgun, Jamal Ellington. He didn't dare look into the rearview mirror, not because he feared Celeste's gaze, but because he knew he didn't have the courage to meet it. Celeste said nothing. She leaned lightly against the seatback, neck straight, eyes staring out the blurred glass. In a fading corner of her vision, the county admin building shrank into the past like an unwelcome memory. She'd entered that place more than 30 times, but this time she came in cuffs. When the car stopped at the side entrance of Ashgate Hold, the Bridgetown Police Headquarters, Colton Maddox opened the door. Out. He didn't shout. He wasn't rough, but his tone was the kind used only for the accused. Celeste stepped out, each footfall measured in years, unwavering, unshaken. As she passed the wide front window, she caught her reflection. Plain clothes, faded combat boots, and metal cuffs polished to a shine, like someone had gone out of their way to make them gleam just to shackle the wrong person. In the cramped interview room, cold fluorescent lights above, brittle white plastic chairs below, Celeste sat still. She didn't check the clock, didn't ask why she was being held. She just stared at a faintly scratched line etched into the tabletop. Truth dies here. She exhaled, not out of exhaustion, but like clearing a path for what was coming. When Colton returned, holding a thin intake form with no real legal basis, he dropped his words like stones into a still lake. You're being held for identity verification. There's a good chance you're impersonating a military officer. Celeste didn't argue. She only asked, voice steady as a river that refused to run dry. Am I allowed a phone call? Colton smirked. Calling your lawyer? No, I'm calling the Department of Defense. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Colton's brow furrowed. He didn't speak, but he nodded. An old rotary phone was slid across the table. Its coil cord tangled, the numbers faded, and the line reserved for suspects one permitted call. Celeste was uncuffed, but she remained in the exact same position. She picked up the receiver and dialed a series of numbers. No area code, no international prefix, just 8 short, precise digits. When the line connected, she didn't state her name, didn't explain the situation. She simply said, Granger, code Tango Echo 15. I'm being held. On the other end, a man's voice replied, calm, measured, unhurried. Understood. I'll take care of it. She hung up. Not another word was spoken. Total call duration, 19 seconds. Colton stood across from her, arms crossed over his chest, scoffing. That code sounds like a kid's walkie-talkie game. Celeste looked him straight in the eye. Not with contempt, not with anger. Just the gaze of someone who already knew the ending. Only the others hadn't read that far ahead. Out in the hallway, an internal phone began to ring. Once, twice, 3 times. No one answered. On the 4th ring, another officer stepped in, voice low but firm. You're being asked to pick up. Call from military command. Colton froze. In those 19 seconds, Celeste hadn't pleaded, hadn't begged. She had activated a mechanism Colton wasn't ranked high enough to even know existed. And only then did her silence begin to echo, not through words, but through the weight of a system that was now preparing to turn around. The 5th ring dragged out like a brake cable pulled taut on a freeway, shrill, urgent, unavoidable. At Ashgate Hold, Chief Ronald Beckett had just set his coffee mug down when the intercom flared in the surveillance room. A young staffer entered, pale-faced. Sir, there's a federal-level call from the Ashwood Intelligence Hub. Beckett stood up at once, motioning the staffer to leave the room. He picked up the phone. The voice on the other end was deep, steady, no inflection, no wasted breath. This is Lieutenant General Silas Granger. Am I speaking with the officer responsible for the current detention of one Celeste Harmon? Beckett swallowed hard. Yes, sir. The individual is currently. Granger cut him off. No explanation needed. Listen carefully. Cease all proceedings immediately. Release the detainee within 5 minutes. This is a direct order from the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Failure to comply will result in your office being referred to the Department of Justice for obstruction of national security protocol. A beat passed. Then one last directive. And if anyone in that station still questions her identity, check code Tango Echo 15 in the classified federal archives. If you have the clearance. The call ended without a goodbye. Just a sharp click, like the flick of a safety off a loaded weapon. Beckett stood frozen for a few seconds, then bolted out of the room like his shoes were on fire. On his way to the holding area, he didn't bother straightening his coat or asking for fresh coffee. He uttered only 3 words to the desk officer on duty. Get Maddox. Now. Meanwhile, Colton Maddox was still leaning against the corner of the room, as if the joke he'd made about radio games was still ringing in his ears. But everything shifted when Jamal Ellington burst in from the hallway, panting like he'd just biked uphill. Sir, there's a call from the Pentagon. Direct from General Granger. Colton stared at Jamal like he'd just mentioned an alien invasion. What did you say? They've ordered the immediate halt of all procedures and the release of Ms. Harmon within 5 minutes. If not, the matter will be escalated under federal security law. A chill shot down Colton's spine like a bucket of ice water dumped on him in mid-July. He blinked, stepping back as if someone had just punched him in the gut. The room froze. Celeste remained seated. Her hands were free now. Her gaze never left the small scratch on the surface of the table, where the words "truth dies here" now seemed false. Beckett appeared at that exact moment, flinging the door open so hard the knob bounced off the wall. He swept his eyes over Colton, then looked at Celeste. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need confirmation. He simply spoke, his voice low but clear, enough to etch itself into the memory of everyone in that police station for the rest of their lives. Apologies for the delay, Major General Harmon. A clerk in the back dropped a file. The name Harmon hit every ear like a seismic wave. Colton backed away completely, face drained of all color. Jamal Ellington's mouth fell open, but no words came out. As for Celeste, she simply nodded, stood up, adjusted her collar, and said, "I'm fine." But this isn't the first time. In that moment, the entire Ashgate Hold station stood still. No one spoke. No one moved. Only the wall clock ticked on, and a new awareness, heavy as a gravestone, began pressing down on everyone in the building. They had arrested the wrong person. And not just a person, they had challenged the very system she represented. That silence, ironically, was the loudest sound the station had ever known. No one moved. Since Chief Ronald Beckett had uttered the words, "Apologies for the delay, Major General Harmon," the entire station seemed frozen in place. The front desk officers fell mute. The printer still hummed. Coffee still dripped. The wall clock still ticked, but none of it registered. Colton Maddox leaned against the wall, fists clenched as if trying to hold himself together. His chest rose and felt like he'd just run 5 miles. He couldn't look at Celeste anymore. Not because of her rank, but because of the way she held her silence. The way a woman who had been handcuffed in broad daylight now stood upright, as though none of it had touched her. Chief Beckett approached Celeste, his voice quiet and his head slightly inclined, like a bow of respect. "I take full responsibility. All records and procedures will be nullified immediately." Celeste said nothing. She met his eyes. No condemnation, no forgiveness. Only a gaze that seemed to weigh the truth itself. And in that instant, Beckett understood. He wasn't facing an insulted subordinate. He was standing before the moral backbone of a system he once believed untouchable. In the surveillance room behind them, Officer Jamal Ellington hurried to pull up Celeste's records. He typed in Harmon, Celeste, and hit enter. The screen flickered. A warning appeared. Access tier Sigma. 1 required. Restricted entry. Jamal whispered, his voice drained. She's in Sigma. 1 clearance. Colton heard it. His heart dropped into his stomach. That phrase, Sigma 1, wasn't something officers like him were even allowed to say. It was a clearance level reserved for individuals under the Department of Defense's highest protection tier, answerable only to the Joint Chiefs. As Beckett escorted Celeste out of the holding room, an inbound call rang from the internal secure line. A rarity. The caller ID showed only 3 characters, D17. Beckett glanced at Celeste. She gave a subtle nod. Take it. They won't call twice. Beckett picked up the phone. The voice on the other end wasn't loud, wasn't rushed, but carried undeniable weight. This is Deputy Provost Marshal General Sheridan Pike. I'll be brief. The incident at Ashgate Hold has been logged. Effective immediately, all images, audio recordings, and documentation relating to Major General Celeste Harmon are to be retrieved under emergency directive of the Flux Sentinel Drive, Protocol Obsidian. Anyone who obstructs even a single line of data will face federal prosecution. Beckett didn't have time to respond. The line had already gone dead. Out in the hallway, every eye turned toward Celeste as she walked through. No one called her suspect anymore. No one looked at their badge with the same confidence. A night shift officer whispered, "My God, that's her, the one who commanded the reinforcement unit during Operation Kringle." Another officer nodded, as if waking from a trance. "I saw her name on the defense bulletin last year. They say she led her entire squad out of a kill zone with nothing but a paper map in her bare hands." And then, like a final note in an already breathless symphony, a young girl with braided hair stepped into the lobby. The girl, Naira Elston, was the one who had recorded the moment Celeste was handcuffed in the parking lot. She clutched an iPad nearly bigger than her face, her hands trembling, unsure if she was in the right place. "You're the lady from the video, aren't you?" Celeste turned, smiled gently, knelt down, and said, "Yes, I am. And you are braver than everyone in this police station today." That video, just 45 seconds long, would later spark a movement. But right then, inside Ashgate Hold, it was simply the first proof that truth doesn't need to be shouted to be heard. And that identity doesn't lie in an ID card, but in how someone stands after being misjudged. When Celeste Harmon stepped out of Ashgate Hold, the noon sun had softened, but the air inside the station still felt like it was on fire. Not because someone had spoken out, but because silence from the highest levels had just dropped like a weight. The Pentagon had officially intervened, and everyone inside knew this was only the beginning of the quake. Less than 12 minutes after she left the station, Ashgate Hold's internal server began flashing with red flag alerts. A line of text blinked at the top of the central data hub screen. Emergency retrieval, behavioral file, Officer Colton R. Maddox, classified ETH Alpha /bias surveillance. Technical Officer Talia Mendoza, who was halfway through a sandwich while reviewing camera logs, nearly choked when the system auto-activated and opened all prior records of unauthorized stops made by Colton. "What the hell?" Talia muttered. A thick file loaded. 5 years of data. Every report, every stop, every dashcam video. And one detail stood above the rest. Nearly every stop without probable cause targeted black individuals or those of minority descent. Upstairs, Chief Beckett was now taking his second call in less than 30 minutes from the Federal Integrity Unit, FIU. This time, the voice was female, sharp as a pencil blade. "This is Desiree Holloway, Director of Behavioral Oversight at FIU. Your station is now under semi-emergency internal review. Send all documentation related to Officer Maddox to the Flux Sentinel Drive immediately. And by the way, it appears his 2022 file was never properly audited." Beckett let out a long sigh, the kind of sigh that signaled a day ending with aspirin, not coffee. "We'll cooperate. But is it just us on this review list? You think this is only about you?" She hung up. Meanwhile, Colton R. Maddox sat in his private office, where a plaque on the wall still read Regional Rapid Response Award 2020. He hadn't left the station. His tie was off, sweat beading on his forehead, his palms slightly trembling. On the desk lay a printed notice from a system. "Weapon surrender required. Administrative status. Temporary suspension." He read it, then read it again. Pen still in hand, but he didn't sign. Not out of defiance. He just didn't know what to write for himself anymore. The door swung open. Officer Jamal Ellington stood there, 14 years younger than Colton. Yet today, his eyes carried the weight of a class monitor watching a teacher being stripped of rank. Jamal didn't say much, just placed a stack of files on the desk, freshly printed by Talia. They know, Colton. Everything. Down the hallway, the printer hummed on, page after page of ignored documentation. Every report stamped suspicious subject, non-compliant. Every camera clip that never made it into an official log, now all rising to the surface. An older officer mumbled as he passed Jamal's door. Thought they cuffed the wrong person. Turns out they opened the wrong damn gate to hell. And somewhere high above, inside the Ashwood Intelligence Hub, General Silas Granger was reviewing the incident summary. His eyes stopped at one line. Major General Celeste Harmon, handcuffed in a civilian parking lot by an officer without a search warrant. He picked up his pen and underlined the words, "without a warrant," 3 times. Then laid the pen down and muttered quietly to himself. A system only holds when it judges itself. Otherwise, it'll be the silent ones who wake it up. The next morning, a photo of Celeste walking out of the station, uncuffed, head held high, appeared as the lead screen on the Flux system, flagged with a red label. Ethical Review Milestone. Ashgate Incident, Priority Level, Red. And just like that, from a small-town precinct in Bridgetown, a quiet national investigation began. Not because Celeste had spoken, but because the system had finally been forced to hear the voice of its own silence. Over 700 miles away, at a military logistics depot in Missouri, Jalen Reddick was hunched over, checking an outbound shipment of medical supplies headed for the front lines. At 38, the seasoned former battlefield scout now wore a tech jacket, reading glasses, and moved through life like the combat chapters of his story had long been closed. But then a fellow crew member tossed him a phone and said, "Hey, you got to see this. Cops just cuffed a female general right in Georgia." Jalen watched the video. By the 3rd second, he froze. That look, that stance, the way Celeste didn't resist, didn't bow her head, just stood tall and stared straight ahead, as if it were she, not the officers, delivering judgment on a system that had just arrested the wrong person. It could only be her. Jalen didn't need further proof. He'd seen that same gaze once before through dust and gunfire in the Panjshir Valley. Back then, his unit had been ambushed. Communications were down, ammo nearly gone. Jalen, just a private at the time, had been hit, shrapnel in his left shoulder, and lay motionless behind an embankment. Everyone thought he wouldn't make it. But Celeste, then an advance unit commander, had pulled him out from the line of fire, tied off his wound with a length of paracord, and used his own rifle to shoot their way out. That memory had never faded, just folded away, until today, when he saw the woman who had once saved his life treated like a criminal in broad daylight. Jalen sat down at his desk and opened his laptop. No briefings, no protocols, just words, line by line, in a voice steady but heavy as stone. She didn't need to scream, because Celeste Harmon only ever screamed once, in a hail of bullets, calling my name so I'd know I wasn't dead. I breathed, because she didn't leave me behind. And now, if we let her walk through this humiliation in silence, maybe it's us who are leaving our honor behind. He signed it with his real name. Jalen Reddick, veteran, Mission 14, Echo, 3 Zone. Then posted it in a small group for veterans. 12 minutes later, the post had been shared across more than 300 private military forums. 3 hours later, it appeared on the message board of the Redstone Defense Academy, the same academy that once printed Celeste's photo on their training manuals. 6 hours later, a soldier who'd served in Kandahar commented, "I don't know Harmon off the battlefield, but if a man says she saved him and writes something like that, then I know where I stand." And then something unexpected happened. On a late-night talk show in Atlanta, a reporter quietly printed the post. No interviews, no commentary, just read it aloud, word for word, live on air. There was no applause, no laughter, only still eyes staring back. Because sometimes, the truth doesn't need to be argued to be right. It just needs to be remembered, at the right time, by someone who refuses to forget. And Jalen's memory, buried for years beneath combat dust, became the first gust of wind in a storm no system could contain. His post wasn't just a testimony. It was a collective awakening, a reminder of a woman who didn't need to raise her voice to defend her dignity, but still made an entire generation of veterans fall silent when her name was spoken. Celeste Harmon. From private veteran forums, the story spread to military colleges, law enforcement academies, and organizations for wounded soldiers. And then, a strange silence began to ripple outward, like a flood without sound. At Redstone Defense Academy, one cadet quietly removed the plaque bearing Colton R. Maddox's name from the Wall of Honor and replaced it with a single sheet of paper. On it, a printed photo of Celeste, and beneath it, a line from Jalen's post. I breathed because she didn't leave me behind. No one signed their name. No one claimed responsibility. But the old plaque was never returned. At a local cafe that used to offer free drinks to police officers, the owner quietly took down a photo of Maddox, presenting an award to a group of teenagers. No explanation was given. In its place, he posted a simple handwritten sign. Honor isn't in the medal. It's in how a man treats those he's sworn to protect. A defining moment came 3 days later during the nationally televised evening program Civic Talks, produced by Atlanta Current. The editorial team had invited a special guest, Lieutenant Kyle Sheeran, a former teammate of Maddox's, to analyze the incident from a professional standpoint. But midway through the broadcast, when the host asked, "What's your take on a U.S. Major General being treated like a suspect?" Kyle didn't answer immediately. He stared into the camera, exhaled, and silently removed the Rapid Response Unit badge from his lapel. "I wore this into conflict zones in Basra. But if I wear it and stay silent while a general is humiliated in broad daylight, then I'm betraying the very ideals I took to the battlefield." The studio fell into stunned silence. The host tried to pivot, but it was too late. Audience members were already on their feet, applauding. It was the first time in the show's history that a live news broadcast ended in a standing ovation. No one said Colton Maddox. They didn't have to. The next day, Northbridge Media, the publishing company once contracted to release Maddox's memoir, The Confrontation Profession, quietly announced the project was canceled, deposit forfeited, no statements given. On their homepage, one line remained: "We do not print the stories of those erased by collective memory." Back at Ashgate Hold, where it had all begun, a framed tribute to Maddox was removed from the main corridor. In its place, someone, likely a night shift employee, taped up a quote from the U.S. Constitution without asking for approval. "Justice shall not be blind. It shall be brave." No one asked who posted it. No one took it down. And that, in itself, was the strongest indictment. No slogans, no rallies, just individuals scattered throughout the system, quietly adjusting course. As if keeping Colton Maddox's name on the wall might tilt the whole building off its foundation. And when silence becomes the shared language of an entire institution, it echoes louder than any speech ever broadcast on national television. On Monday morning, the halls of Bridgetown Police Academy, usually alive with the steady rhythm of bootsteps, were strangely quiet. Where over 100 cadets trained each term, the digital bulletin board blinked a single red message: behavioral ethics class suspended. Curriculum under emergency revision. No one said why, but everyone knew. The name Colton Maddox, once a core example in the Academy's high-stress decision-making module, had been wiped clean from all training material. In its place, a large screen in the first-year lecture hall played a brand-new documentary from Civic Channel, Silent in the Storm: The Journey of Major General Celeste Harmon. The opening scene was raw footage from the police station's own camera. Celeste standing still, hands cuffed, her eyes not angry, but cutting through the room, through the very system that had failed to protect the dignity it claimed to serve. At high schools across Bridgetown County, senior students received applications for law enforcement academy enrollment. But within hours, over 60% returned the forms and signed. Many included a simple handwritten note: "We will not join a system that cannot bow its head to apologize to a woman who fought for this country's freedom." the school board quietly submitted a formal request to the state, urging reforms in career counseling programs for public service fields. That same week, at the Bridgetown School of Law, students from the Department of Military Justice submitted a petition to integrate a new core module into the curriculum: civil rights and legal protection for minority officers. The tipping point came when Redline News, once known for its Blue Shield segment celebrating police heroism, issued a rare public apology. Just 3 months earlier, they had aired a glowing profile of Maddox. On live television, the editor-in-chief admitted, "We failed to vet. We failed to question character beneath the commendations. And most of all, we failed by staying silent when a major general was publicly humiliated and no one came to her defense." Elsewhere, Bridgetown South University hosted an open symposium titled Justice Reexamined: When the System Must Relearn Itself. Among the guests were scholars, veterans, law students, and one especially quiet presence: Mrs. Desiree Holloway, mother of a senior police cadet who had declined to graduate in protest. She didn't give a long speech. She simply shared what her son had said after watching Celeste get handcuffed on the news. "If you ever taught me to respect those in uniform, then today, I need to prove it by not wearing the wrong one." The clip of her story was viewed millions of times within 48 hours. The system didn't collapse overnight, but clearly it had begun to bow, not from being struck down, but because it was finally learning how to stand up the right way. Then came Friday morning. While the nation still echoed with the shockwaves of the Celeste effect, a front-page article landed in Command Integrity, the U.S. military's most respected journal of operational ethics. Its author, General Clayton Mercer, commander of U.S. Strategic Operations, age 64, a man known for not speaking often, but whose words echoed through every level of the Pentagon when he did. The first line didn't need italics or footnotes. It was just truth. "I once entrusted the lives of 4,000 service members to Major General Celeste Harmon, and she never gave me a reason to doubt her." No slogans, no outrage, just a truth so clear it needed no embellishment. But the way General Mercer wrote it, using her full name, rank, and the gravity of his trust, left no room for the system to pretend this had merely been an unfortunate incident. The article was reposted by hundreds of generals, both active duty and retired. Some signed an open letter to Congress, calling for a formal ethics inquiry into the law enforcement sector. Others, quieter but no less resolute, chose action over statements. At the Pinehurst Military Council, the annual gathering of the Defense Advisory Board began with an unprecedented ritual. Every member stood for a moment of silence, to honor all who wore the uniform, only to be humiliated by those sworn to protect them. That minute marked the rise of collective memory. What happened to Celeste was no longer seen as an isolated event. It had become a moral litmus test for the entire system. From Washington, D.C. to forward operating bases abroad, whispers returned to a question once thought outdated. Where does honor begin? It wasn't in rank, not in accolades or scripted speeches. It began in how we treat those we believe hold no power at all. A leaked internal memo from the Department of Homeland Security ordered the full revision of officer training programs, specifically those involving interagency interactions and the treatment of federally protected personnel. But it was the final line that made people pause. From this point forward, behavioral competency will not be assessed by situational judgment, but by the recognition of human dignity. The black woman handcuffed that day was no longer just Celeste Harmon. She had become a symbol of something greater, a redefinition of power, not who holds more authority, but who preserves another's dignity when they are at their most powerless. And that lesson was now etched into the collective conscience, a story no one could erase. 2 weeks after General Mercer's piece sent shockwaves through national institutions, Celeste Harmon still had not appeared on television. No press conferences, no open letters, not a single personal post on any public platform. Instead, her image quietly appeared at the National Military History Museum, framed between 2 portraits of Vietnam War legends. The caption below, chilling in its simplicity. Celeste Harmon, born 1984, the commander who required no defense. She had said nothing, and in doing so, left society unable to look away. In Bridgetown, a legal symposium titled Justice and First Impressions drew hundreds of scholars, attorneys, officers, and law students. There were no lectures, no formal addresses. Instead, each person walked up to the stage, opened a notebook, and shared the first time they were judged, for how they looked, where they came from, or for something that had nothing to do with what they could do. A senior sociology student broke down in tears as she spoke. If someone like Major General Harmon, who once commanded an entire battlefield, can still be handcuffed simply because she didn't look like a general, then how many others out there have been misjudged just for being themselves? Elsewhere in Bridgetown County, outside the Hillcrest Memorial Center, Celeste stood quietly beside the gravestone of an unnamed soldier. No one recognized her. No one needed to. A young boy in a red sweatshirt approached her, clutching a hand-drawn card shaded with colored pencils. He hesitated, then held it out to her. "I don't know who you are, but my mom said the woman who got arrested in that parking lot is the reason I need to learn to listen to people before judging them." Celeste bowed her head slightly, accepting the card without a word. But her eyes, deep and vast, like they had once carried oceans, said more than any speech ever could. In the wake of the incident, the Institute for Public Justice released a nationwide survey with a result that left many in stunned silence. 76% of respondents believed justice in America no longer came from the system, but instead depended on the moral presence of the individuals within it. And that presence, silent, steady, needing no justification, became a public indictment of a society that had once prided itself on knowing how to recognize justice. In the years that followed, no one referred to it as the wrongful arrest. They spoke only of one thing. The day a general was doubted for being a black woman was the day America was forced to look at itself. And from that day forward, the most important question was no longer who was right, but who had the courage to stay silent and still make the world listen.